Okay, it gives me great pleasure. I get to announce the keynote. So Amber and I just met recently. I moved here from Chicago. I was in public education for 15 years and sort of social justice spaces in Chicago for a long time doing race and gender work. And we were looking for a keynote, and a friend said, oh my goodness, you have to meet Amber. She lives out here. You all are, there is this kindred spirit connection. You need to meet her. And we met, and sort of through all of this came out this piece of Amber coming to be our keynote for today. So I'm going to read a little bit of Amber's bio. The title of the keynote is Equity Literacy, Read and Respond to Oppression in Schools, which I'm so excited about. That little intro to equity literacy that you have in your packet is connected to this keynote. So Amber asked that we include that and pass that out. So Amber is a lecturer in critical pedagogy master's program at the University of Colorado, Denver, where she prepares educators to critique curriculum and instruction and policies in education. As an active consultant and presenter, Amber helps educators and students develop equity literacy. You're going to hear this term used a lot today. If you've taken our E3 training, we talk about the same concept, but we talk about it as equity consciousness. We're really talking about the same thing when we use those two words. She challenges educators to define education equity and student voice work as fundamentally anti-oppression work. Amber is a native of the south suburbs of Chicago. We have the Chicago connection. With a strong desire to work for social justice, she became a secondary English and social studies teacher. She taught for 3 years at Plainfield High School, and then she moved and was teaching in Atlanta and Denver. She completed her PhD in 2012 while raising her 3 young children, one of whom is here today. You want to raise your hand? All right. Okay. Daughter of the superstar over there. She's a competitive kickboxer and a cat lover. First of all, I just want to say when Amber and I met, we were like talking about equity issues, and Amber said that she was a fighter, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm like with her. I'm like, yeah, I'm a fighter. I'm thinking about like fighting for what I believe in, and like I get into problems. And then I realized later on that she references it again, like, oh, no, she's actually like a fighter, like a kickboxer, right? She actually does this work. Because I'm like, yeah, me too. And I'm like, oh, no, I don't do Muay Thai. Anyway, she's an unapologetic advocate fighting to eliminate oppression from schools and to create spaces for our most marginalized students to be heard. So if we can give her a big round of applause, welcome her in.
All right, do I have to use that one or can you?
You can do whatever you like.
So I'm usually not very nervous. I speak in front of 300 or 400 people. And I am so nervous because that little 11-year-old is in this crowd today. I'm like, she's going to critique me. Oh, Mom, you should have done, that one video you do. But, you might switch over. All right. So, yeah, I'm here to talk about equity literacy, which is about reading oppression in our schools. It's literacy. Can we read a book? Well, can we read oppression? And I start all these presentations off with 3 questions. Who are we? How did we get here? And what are we going to do about it? So what my sense is who are we? From what I heard in the intro, we are diversity, inclusivity, and equity people. And when you put D-I-E together, some people don't do that. They switch the letters around. It's DI. We are DI people. And we're not necessarily people of color, especially in this demographic. People think that diversity, inclusivity, equity people are the black and brown people in a district, that's who should do this work. And that's not really the case. I am really nervous for you being here, Scarlett. I'm white, obviously, very, very white. And I believe that white people need to do this work. They need to lead it in schools because we are not marginalized. We have more power. We're not as exhausted because we're not facing this all the time. So if we're not people of color in this room, that's okay because we need to be doing this work. We're also not necessarily know-how people. Just because you're here doesn't mean you know how to do this work, because we are here to know more and to learn how. That's what I think this whole day is about. So how did we get here? Ooh. Some people here are marginalized, and that doesn't mean just by race and class. You could be a woman, you could be gay, you could be transgender, you could be younger or older, but oftentimes people who are interested in equity have felt marginalized in their communities. Or you've witnessed marginalization. So maybe you're a completely dominant culture and you're watching in your schools and you're watching in society and you're pissed off. You're watching the marginalization of friends, peers, young ones, old ones, and you're done. So you're here for that reason. Some of you were voluntold. You picked the short end of the stick And you're like, oh, I'm going to an equity training and learning about racism and classism. Woo, fun. I swear to God, my husband thinks for a job, he works for finance. He believes my job is going to large groups and telling them they're racist. And I'm like, no, that's not exactly what I do, but close. You know, he's like, why do people even come? And I'm like, it's not like Oprah, you're a racist, everybody's racist. No, that's not what I do. That's what he thinks I do, but that's not what I do. And some of you are just interested in this concept. Not really sure exactly how you got here, but you have an interest. Not really sure about your identities and privilege and targeting, but interested. So now, what are we going to do about it? And it is often inequity. It's marginalization. It's oppression. And what we're knowing about your school is we don't even know what it is yet because we don't know what equity is yet. Like, we're going to focus on equity. Well, what is inequity? This question has to be addressed before we can address and work toward equity. What is the inequity that we're trying to solve? So think for just 30 seconds. What comes up in your mind when I say educational inequity is? Just take 30 seconds to think. So I've been doing this a long time, and the two answers I get most often, see if this is one of your two answers, the achievement gap. That there is a gap between kids of color and white kids. That's educational inequity, this big gap. Or between poor kids and affluent kids. Between females and males. So a gap. How many of you chose, don't raise your hands, that educational inequity is a gap? The other definition I often get is bad schools. How many of you know of Jonathan Kozol's work from the 1990s, Savage Inequalities? Okay. Jonathan Kozol went into a bunch of schools, the poor schools versus affluent schools, the schools for kids of color, the schools for white kids, and he saw that white kids and affluent kids got excellent, beautiful, shiny schools with great resources, the best teachers, the best facilities, and black children, brown children, and poor children got crappy schools. They were dilapidated with rats in them, horrible food, no books, and that's what he called the savage inequality. What we notice now, though, that's not necessarily the inequality. We have created great charter schools and regular schools for kids of color and low socioeconomic status. So they're beautiful, pretty, shiny schools, and they may or may not close the achievement gap. So then what is the oppression? What's the oppression they're facing? Well, I'm going to show you that the oppression that they're facing is not always the gap, and it's not always a bad school. And Facundo's going to tell us about this. It's a live, breathing, active thing in our schools that's not just a gap sitting there, and it's not just a bad building. It's something more. I have to do it manually. Oh, it went back. Do you have Facundo?
My name, when I started kindergarten, was Ramon. And by the time I was in the second grade, everybody was calling me Raymond. You know, out in the playground, in the classroom, Raymond, hey, Raymond, hey, Raymond. And so you're trying to adjust to this, you know what I mean? And if there was a girl named Maria, her name became Mary. And Juanita became Jane. So one day, we got a new student by the name of Facundo Gonzalez. Facundo Gonzalez, man. When he came into school, we noticed they called an emergency administrative meeting. You kind of hear him talking to the door. What are we going to do with this guy, man? You know what I mean? How are we going to change his name, you know? And one teacher goes, well, you know what? Why don't we try to shorten the name a little bit? And they go, yeah, well, but how do you spell it? Facundo. They go, why don't we just spell it F-A-C? And one of the teachers, well, that means his name would be Fac. And the other teachers looked at it, no, that sounds too much like a dirty word. You can't be saying, Fac, where's your homework, you know? Where's Fac at, you know what I mean? So that was a trip we always remembered going to elementary school. because Facundo was the only guy who never got his name changed.
So we notice in this clip that we don't know if his school's great or not. It looks decent. It doesn't look dilapidated. It's got a great playground. We also, we don't know if there's a gap between he and his peers. And often, this could be a segregated school, completely. But what we do notice, that regardless of the gap, and regardless of the fact how good or bad the school is, they don't have education equity, or they don't have equity because there's oppression. They're changing kids' names, and they're pretty much saying that white is American and white is right. White is easy for me. I'm a white teacher. I need to change your name. I need to make it like me, and that's the right thing to do. So basically what we're learning is that we don't have educational equity in schools until they are free of oppression. And that's all kinds of oppression. I know today we're talking about racism and classism, but it's really all of these other ones. Sexism, heterosexism, ageism, cissexism, ableism, just to name a few. There's 16 in total. So look at this list. If you don't know what one of these isms is, write it down. Take a picture of the screen. Because we don't have educational equity until we are rid of all of these inequities. And there's some weird ones on there that you might not be familiar with. But we can't have educational equity in our district and say that we are working toward equity if these are in our buildings. Now, how do we do that? I mean, I'm an anti-oppression educator. I'm a white woman from the south side of Chicago. My first language is English, and I'm straight. How do I get rid of this in myself? I don't. I would contend that I am racist, and that I am heterosexist, and I am cissexist, and I'm ableist as well. So if I can't get rid of them in me after all the work I've done, how do we get rid of them in a school? Well, it's a journey, first of all. I hope I'm less racist than I was when I started this journey. But it's only through equity literacy, the ability to read oppression, to read injustice, and address it, that we can get rid of it in ourselves and in our schools. I keep saying this word. What is equity literacy? What is equity literacy? So now I'm actually going to tell you. Here's the definition. It's the ability to see, respond to, and redress injustice, inequity, in our organizations, schools, communities, and society. So for us, it's our schools, classrooms, and districts. It's the ability to see it, to see oppression, not just racism, not just classism, but all of those isms. But today we're going to focus on racism and classism. But can you see it when it's happening? Not the overt kind, not the Ku Klux Klan, tiki torch, that's the new version, right? Tiki torch kind of racism, but can you see the subtle, covert racism? And classism is a hard one to see. That's not easy, but can you see it? And when you do see it, do you know what to say to it? Do you know what to say when it's your leader? Do you know what to say when it's your colleague? Do you know what to say when it's your student? Do you know what to say when it's your grandpa at the Thanksgiving table? Which is the hardest one to say. You don't always say anything, right? Do you know what to say? And then, once you see it and you say something, do you know what to do deeply to start to change that? That's the hard one. And it usually can never be done alone. It has to be done with people. Now, the person who coined this term is Dr. Paul Gorski, and I follow his work. So Gorski, and that's the sheet that you have in front of you about the equity literacy. So you have the definitions about equity literacy. You have his name on there. He also wrote about the principles of equity literacy. And there's two that we're really going to focus on. And there is no path to justice without a direct confrontation of injustice. So this work is never comfortable. It's never easy. If we are going to do equity work in our district, if we are going to commit to equity, we have to directly confront injustice. That's it. No excuses. We must confront it. And that's not comfortable, and it gets us in trouble sometimes. We also have to focus on initiatives that don't fix marginalized people, like our kids or our families. We can't fix them by making them work harder for, twice as hard for half as much. We have to fix the conditions that marginalize them. So when we see our kids struggling, our kids of low socioeconomic status, our kids of color, our gay students, our trans students, we can't fix them by making them do something differently. We have to find the conditions and then fix those conditions. And the last one is very similar to that. It's just about don't examine and learn about that the poor person or the black person or the gay person, but learn about the injustice that has plagued that person rather than learning about that person. Learn the injustice. So the first part of equity literacy is the ability to see it. And people say to me all the time, Amber, you must be so angry. You just must be angry all the time because that's all you're talking about is racism and classism. You see it everywhere. How come you're not angry? And I'm like, well, I kind of am angry a lot. I do see a lot of injustice. And it says if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. And I have the privilege of going home and turning off seeing racism. I have the privilege of going home and turning off seeing heterosexism because I'm straight. I don't have the privilege of going home and turning off sexism. So I know that I have to keep seeing things and keep being angry in the areas where I'm privileged. Because I'm telling you, a black woman doesn't get to go home and turn off seeing racism and seeing sexism at the same time. So I shouldn't use that privilege as well. And that's hard, and that makes it hard when my daughter is trying to watch Scooby-Doo, and I'm like just angry at Scooby-Doo for the sexism coming out of there, and she's like, can I just watch Scooby-Doo? I'm like, no, that's wrong. Do you see how they dress those two women? A woman can be smart and pretty. What does pretty even mean anyways? Yeah, so no, it is. I'm angry all the time. So this is something that I want to see if you can see the injustice. This is something that you may have received 2 years back on Happy Women's Day. It was Happy Women's Equality Day. It was August 26th that they sent this out, and they were like, hey, women, happy Equality Day to you. On this day in 1920, you got the right to vote. So I want you to look at it. Men look at it too, not just women, because men need to see the injustice more than women, because we already see it. But white women and men need to look at this and see what they see. Any guesses on the injustice that's being represented here that you can see? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, no, you got it, you got it. Mm-hmm. Right. We might have equal right to vote, but we definitely don't have equity. Yeah, excellent. And the fact that this only went to women. Like, women's news only matters for women. Black history is only for black people. Like, come on, that's not who needs it, Women don't need this. Other people need it too. So, Aja noticed that. That's the woman it was sent to. And Aja says, I just reported Facebook's post to Facebook as spam because on August 26, 1920, that's the day white women were allowed to vote. Native women were not allowed to vote to 1924. Correction, 1964, and even as late as 1967. Asian women, 1952. Black women, 1964. Intersectionality matters because without it, we whitewash parts of our history. If you whitewash history, you whitewash identity. You erase it, and it's wrong. So many of us clicked through this and got it on our Facebook feed and weren't really able to see the injustice, all those layers of injustice that were embedded in it. So we want to be able to see that even if we can't respond, she could respond. But I might not have been able to. But you need to be able to see it. Now, this young man, get ready to queue up, not yet. This man has a cerebral palsy. And he's going to talk about the oppression that he experiences every day that other people can't see. Going back to the idea of equity literacy and the ability to see oppression.
The Cerebral Palsy Foundation asked me to help them promote the show Speechless by giving a list of my top 10 things I wish people knew about CP. I don't really know if I can come up with a list of 10 things, but I'm gonna try. Okay, number 1. Just because I'm in a wheelchair doesn't mean that you can pet me like a dog. I'm not a dog, and I know it seems nice and I'm at dog height, but that doesn't make me a dog. And just because I like to pee outside sometimes, that doesn't make me a dog. And just because I won the Westminster Dog Show last year doesn't mean... Oh my God. Am I a dog? Number 2. I think it's pronounced cerebral palsy. I don't know if cerebral is a word. Number 3. It is hard for people with cerebral palsy to make lists with their fingers, so I'm going to stop doing it. Number 4. If you ask me what's wrong with my legs, the real answer to that is nothing. I have brain damage, so that's a little bit more exciting. Cerebral palsy isn't like, oh, that means your legs don't work. Some people with cerebral palsy are walking around just fine. Number 5. Just because I have cerebral palsy doesn't mean I'm inherently inspiring. I'm inspiring because I'm an author, a YouTuber, and I have the biceps of a Greek god. Number 6, even though I have cerebral palsy, I still consider myself incredibly lucky. I have a great career, I have wonderful friends, and somehow I've managed to make a living while not getting up before noon most days. Number 7, just because your grandson has cerebral palsy doesn't mean I know him, Ethel. I mean, we don't even live in the same state. Number 8, yes, I'm gonna need some help with some stuff sometimes, but just talk to me like I'm a normal 31-year-old guy who's spilled a carton of chocolate milk on himself. Number 9, you are welcome to pray for me if you want, but I feel like having cerebral palsy is part of the reason I'm supposed to be here, and one of the tools that I can use to help people be a little bit more compassionate and open to people with differences. So it's just, I'm working with what I got there. And number 10, and most importantly, almost everything I've said is subjective, and you should just talk to more people with CP and see what they feel about it. Because I'm not a spokesman for all people with CP. People with CP are as diverse as all of humanity. So just go out there, have a conversation, and do what you can to educate yourself. So that's about as good a list as I can come up with on the fly, and I hope you learned something today. Or nothing. I don't really care. But remember to subscribe to the Cerebral Palsy Foundation and check out ABC's Speechless, premiering September 21st. I think it's at 8:30, but I don't know for sure. And if you want to check out the pilot, it's in the...
So we're talking about microaggressions here, and I think you have a session about that later on, but seeing oppression is about seeing the microaggressions, sorry. Can you switch to the, seeing those in our world and in our classrooms. I mean, I know this was an example of a man, but I can guarantee you, having a daughter with a disability, that this stuff happens in our schools where they're constantly asked questions. You're really thinking, really? What? Really? You're going to ask that question? So becoming aware that that's a form of oppression, even if we don't mean it. Now, when I was young, I was in 3rd grade, or whenever they give that test of the Iowa Basic Skills Test of Geniusness, I don't know what it's called, and I tested really well and was eventually segregated, like they do, into all honors classes because I was brilliant, and they wanted me to advance, and they didn't have an honors class for psychology in high school. So, you know, you're in honors and AP all the way around. You're like with the cool kids, the super smart kids, and then you have to go to psychology, and there's no honors psychology. So I was with the regular kids, and that was really hard because that had been privileged my whole life in high school. And so when I was there, the teachers were yelling. I'm not used to them yelling at us for not doing our work. And someone said, he said, if you don't work hard, you're all going to end up like truck drivers. You don't want to be truck drivers, do you? And at that moment, I was like, no, I don't really want to be a truck driver. But it didn't motivate me to do my work, because at that moment, all I could think about is the man at my home who was driving a truck 60 hours a week, that wasn't even my father, and putting food on our table. Now, if I would have had equity literacy at that point, I would have been pissed. And I would have been like, that's oppression, you're classist, and stood up. But I didn't have equity literacy then. I had shame. I had a lot of shame about where I came from, and it confirmed that, no, I don't want to be that. I'm going to keep going to school, and I'm going to get out of my community, get out of my family. That's what it means. I'm not joking. I love my life now. I have a PhD. I have money. I don't have to worry like my mom did about where to get food and things like that. So I'm not going to pretend and glamorize poverty. It was not beautiful. It was not wonderful. But there is a way to encourage children to become more and to do more and fulfill their potential without denigrating where they are from, their families, and the people who are feeding them. And I felt like this is an example of classism that kind of went under the radar and was used all of the time, that we need to be careful of. Because now, as somebody who has gotten out, I can't go back. I mean, I can go visit my family, but they think I'm stuck up, or they think I'm too fancy, or I think I'm too good for them, and I don't think those things. But that education that they pushed me toward drove a wedge between my family and myself, and it's taken me a long time to get back there. I'm 41. It's taken me 20 years to try and get back to where I'm from. So being careful with the words around getting out and what do you want to be when you grow up. So Beverly Tatum, if you've read Why All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria, phenomenal book. If you really want to know why all the black kids do sit together in the cafeteria, I would read it, because, spoiler alert, it's because all the white kids sit together in the cafeteria. And so she says that if you learn to spot that stuff, whether it's racist stuff, sexist stuff, classist stuff, that is an important skill for not only us to develop. We as educators and as parents have to develop that. But we've got to have our children learn to spot that stuff. So when they're watching Scooby-Doo, they see this. They say that's not right. Why is she dressing that way, Mom? Why is he talking to her like that, Mom? That's really, really important stuff. So that's what Beverly Tatum writes about. The next part of equity literacy is the ability to respond to injustice. And I'm telling you that you have to speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. Because it's not easy. Even as comfortable maybe as I am at seeing and calling my own racism out, when I hear someone say something racist or classist, I still get really shy. I don't know what to say. I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. I don't want to make it awkward. But we have to learn how to do that and have a couple strategies in our pockets to know how to do that. Jon Stewart said, we have made enormous progress in teaching everyone that racism is bad. Where we seem to have dropped the ball is in teaching people what racism is. We know, especially as white folks, that you don't want to be a racist. That's like the worst thing you can be called, is a racist. No, I'm not racist. I have a black friend. I'm not racist, I live in a community that has black people in it. But what happens is we don't understand that racism is smaller things, right? It's the smaller covert things. And once we can see that, do we know what to say back to it? Because we know what to say about a KKK member. We know what to say about those overt acts of racism. But when we see those covert acts, we finally can see them, what do we say? And how do we respond to a racist joke? We've all heard them. We've probably heard them in the last week. How do you respond to that? That's you.
Racist jokes, they can happen anywhere. School, work, Thanksgiving dinner. So if someone tells a racist joke, how do you handle it? So you're at a party and someone tells a racist joke. And that guy in the ghetto is a cop. You know it's true. Do you A, give a sarcastic laugh? That's a good one. B, get mad and throw a chair? That was hilarious. Or C, Google how do you respond to a racist joke? I'm gonna guess you went with C. Jokes come in all shapes, sizes, and in this case, colors. When it comes to racist humor, we're not just talking about being offended, we're talking about jokes being oppressive. So what's the difference? Offensive jokes hurt feelings or make people uncomfortable. Jokes that are oppressive don't just make people uncomfortable, they actually reinforce negative ideas about marginalized groups of people. A study out of Western Carolina University analyzed how people's attitudes changed about particular groups based on the types of jokes they were presented with. What they found is that when people feel discrimination against a certain group is justified, disparaging remarks about that group don't really change your thinking on them. You're pretty much set in stone. But for groups where prejudice attitudes are shifting and being challenged, like women, LGBT folks, and people of color, negative jokes about those groups can release inhibitions, making some people believe the discrimination is justified. This also goes for ironic racism, like when Sarah Silverman did blackface. It's still blackface. No, but I'm like saying something racist to comment on how bad racism is. It's meta. TLDR, words mean things, and they can influence people in negative ways, even if it's just a joke. So what do you do if you hear a racist joke? Here's what's worked for me. First, I ask myself, can I talk about this now? Basically, you gotta pick your battles. Not every situation is suited for don't be a racist 101. No, Grandma. This ends now. But if I can talk about it in that moment, I usually try one of these. The sarcastic approach. You know what's really funny? Ironic racism, still racist. Go completely silent. Play dumb. I don't get it. I mean, this country was stolen from the Native Americans, built by slave labor, and founded by immigrants, so technically, wouldn't that make you illegal? Reply with a judgmental GIF, or GIF if you're one of those. Or you can just unfriend them. I mean, you don't have to put up with that online or off. It's not your job to educate everyone. And when all else fails, just be honest and direct. Hey, that's not funny. I'm really not cool with jokes about people who already have it bad enough, so please don't say stuff like that around me. So does that mean everything is off limits? Not at all. I mean, technically, you can make jokes about whatever you want, but there will always be consequences. So using "it's just a joke" doesn't make it exempt from criticism, nor does complaining about political correctness. So there's an Asian guy.
Now, before we go to the next example, you have in the middle of your tables an email that I received last week from my school for my children. So you can it's a half sheet of paper. While we're switching through, go ahead and look at that email. Now, like I said before, classism is one of the hardest ones to spot. I mean, it's one of the ones that I feel, growing up poor and working class, that I can see pretty easily, but it is a hard one to spot. This is an email that I got last week from the elementary school that my two children attend. And at first was like, oh, okay, this is whatever. But my equity literacy alarm went off. And I said, something isn't sitting right with me with this. And after I think it was only 2 minutes of thinking about it, I knew why. We were going to celebrate blue. All the kids were going to wear blue. They got blue beads. They're out in the playground, blue, blue, blue. And they came home talking about, we're the third best in the school, and we're this, or in the district, something like that. And they were really like, we are better than other schools. We worked really hard, Mom. Our teachers are the best. That's the rhetoric they were told. And I was like, wait. We are not wearing blue tomorrow. And I said, and this is why. And we sat down and we had a conversation. And we debunked some of these things that are in here. One, the idea that we want to thank all our hard-working staff, and our families are a huge part by getting our students to school every day, supporting our needs and making us, we have money and resources from our PTSA. That's all affluence. That's not their hard work. We get to school every day because I could drive a Volvo XC90. I mean, I don't, but I would like to for Christmas if he's here. But I mean, we have reliable transportation, right? I have money to give to the PTSA, more than $5. I have money I can give. So they want to thank us for, it's almost like thanking us for stuff that we already have. We didn't do anything extra. And then talking about what number we are in the district, like we actually are, like we ran a race and we came in third. But there are people on that track running hungry with no shoes, that have been, that don't have proper health care. So we didn't win this race in third. It's not a legitimate third. Dare I say we even cheated a little because we had advantages and we weren't like, hey, I have an advantage, and at the starting line and kind of said it out loud. So there is a little bit of that going on. The other thing that really bothered me is when I went to the celebration and my kids were the only ones not in blue and they put a blue necklace. I said, take that blue necklace off. I'm really mean. I am always angry. And they're like, why do I not get to celebrate? But I was like, where in the city is some child, probably a child of color, probably a child experiencing poverty, forced to wear red, yellow, because their school isn't good enough? And then they're told to work twice as hard next year. They're told you get no recess. You get 10 minutes. You get no English. You get double literacy blocks. You get double math blocks. These kids, they get art. They get field trips every single week. They do, every single week. So I'm like, if we have a blue party, where is the red party? Because that's sad. That's pitiful. That's shameful. And it's not their fault. It's obviously sometimes, to some degree, the fault of socioeconomic status. And so we aren't going to celebrate something we didn't earn entirely on our own, just like they shouldn't be shamed of something that they didn't do entirely on their own. So that's where I saw classism. And of course, because we're in the Facebook age, I got on Facebook and I'm like, my kids will not be celebrating blue. And, it's the highest rating. And you need to know that we have a really low free and reduced lunch rate. And so I just went on there and said my piece. Some people unfriend me, that's all right, because they want to believe in the blueness of their school and the brilliance of their children. And I do believe my children are brilliant. Look at that. That child is brilliant. But it's not on her own doing. Times she's been abroad, she has more passport stamps than, in her passport than it took me 40 years to get. That's the reason why they're blue. So, where are you from? The last one I'm going to show for the can you respond to racism. This is a really good one that we actually get all the time. Her father emigrated from South Korea when he was 10, and I swear to you, to this day, he has no accent, not even like kind of an accent, and we get this every single day, or every single week, sorry.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Oh, no. Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there.
I mean before that.
Before I was born.
Yeah, where are your people from?
Well, my great-grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean. But I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
Hamshasina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place near my apartment. So I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
Oh, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American?
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hello, Governor! What's all this then? Top of the morning to you. Let's get a small tea, small tea! Double, double, toil and trouble! Mind the gap! Beware Jack the Ripper! Bloody hell! Pip pip! Cheerio! I think your people's fish and chips are amazing.
You're weird.
Really? I'm weird? Must be a Korean thing.
Yep. I bet you that's happening to your kids who are identified as Asian American, and some, you could ask. I bet you this has happened more times than you can count, and in our schools. I know with my daughter, who's half Korean, I've been asked several times where I got her. Where did you get her? And that's just very frankly my vagina. I don't know what else to say. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to say to that answer. That's where I got her. So the last one we have is to redress injustice. And that's my response. That's what I say. That's how I respond. It may not be effective at all times. So the redressing injustice is now, what do we do systemically? How do we get there and change systems? Now this one is literally from a child elementary school text, and maybe some of you saw this make the rounds on Columbus Day, but which we don't like Columbus Day. I mean, that's not what I normally call it, but it's this is what came around at that time, and it was about moving out. When the European settlers arrived, they needed land to live on. The First Nations peoples agreed to move to different areas to make room for the new settlements. This is what they teach children. And then we have to answer the questions with the map. Okay? There's a moment to respond in this. So if you are handed this and all of a sudden you must teach this and all of a sudden you didn't know this was in there and you have to teach it. 1, you see it. 2, you read it and you say, okay, kids, and you respond. Let's go look at how this may not or is not true. And you respond in the moment. And you bring in a text that challenges that right away. But how do we work to change textbooks? Where's the letter writing campaigns? Where do we come and attack these non-truths in a way that matters? And there will be a website up on your resource page that links to the story about this, so you can see what was done to actually systemically change and recall these textbooks. But it happens in Tulsa as well. You know, they call them the Tulsa race riots, when it was actually the Tulsa massacre. There was no race riot. Black people were massacred in Tulsa. But again, the history books there are cooked and they're whitewashed. And we're currently in the process of trying to change those textbooks, which is a systemic redressing of inequity there. All right, now, last example of redressing. Y'all know this one, right? My coach said I run like a girl, and I said if he ran a little faster, he could too. This idea that women and our body parts are used to make fun of weak men or their, or weak actions. I know as a fighter, she said I'm a fighter, I am a fighter, and we Thai fighter with like 15 fights. And I hit really hard. I do. I have a really good cross. And my jab, set him up and then knock him out with the cross. And some men will be like, man, you hit like a dude. And that makes me furious because I don't hit like a dude. I hit like a woman. And so I'm constantly pushing back in a sport that's dominated by men around their perception and their idea, their way of intentionally trying to compliment me, but using sexist language to compliment me. Now, that's not the only version of that word. There's another word that starts with a P and ends with a ussy that is constantly used in our schools, not in your classroom per se, but in the hallways to make fun of boys who are being babyish or not courageous or not tough. And it's like when we say gay, oh, that's so gay, which happens still. The P word's coming up all the time. And that's another way of saying, you do that like a girl. So always, yes, the pad company that we're going to talk about, they created a video to challenge and actually try to redress this term in our schools. And this is our last video for today.
Hi, Erin.
Hi.
Okay, so I'm going to just give you some actions to do. Just do the first thing that comes to mind. Show me what it looks like to run like a girl.
My hair. Oh my God.
Show me what it looks like to fight like a girl. Now throw like a girl.
Aw.
My name is Dakota, and I'm 10 years old.
Show me what it looks like to run like a girl. Throw like a girl. Fight like a girl. What does it mean to you when I say run like a girl?
It means run fast as you can.
So do you think you just insulted your sister?
No. I mean, yeah, insulted girls, but not my sister.
Is like a girl a good thing?
Actually, don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing. It sounds like a bad thing. It sounds like you're trying to humiliate someone.
So when they're in that vulnerable time between 10 and 12, how do you think it affects them when somebody uses like a girl as an insult?
I think it definitely drops their self-confidence and really puts them down, because during that time they're already trying to figure themselves out, and when somebody says you hit like a girl, it's like, well, what does that mean? Because they think they're a strong person. It's kind of like telling them that they're weak and they're not as good as them.
And what advice do you have to young girls who are told they run like a girl, kick like a girl, hit like a girl, swing like a girl?
Keep doing it, because it's working. If somebody else says that running like a girl or kicking like a girl or shooting like a girl is something that you shouldn't be doing, that's their problem. Because if you're still scoring and you're still getting to the ball on time and you're still being first, you're doing it right. Doesn't matter what they say. I mean, yes, I kick like a girl and I swim like a girl and I walk like a girl and I wake up in the morning like a girl because I am a girl. And that is not something that I should be ashamed of. So I'm going to do it anyway. That's what they should do.
If I asked you to run like a girl now, would you do it differently?
I would run like myself.
Would you like a chance to redo it?
Yeah.
Why can't run like a girl also mean win the race?
So their campaign is called Rewrite the Rules, and it's really trying to not just respond, but to actually redress and change that in society. So this is what I say when they tell me I hit like a dude, and I say, no, this is me hitting like a girl, and that is my husband in the picture. So he gets to take that. That's why we're married for so long, because I get to hit him. All right, so in redressing, remember, it's the first two. Redressing takes, when we redress and when we respond, we have to directly confront injustice. There is no easy, comfortable way about it. You will be disliked when you do this. You will be called names: reverse racism, a bitch, an angry black woman. All of these things will happen when you confront injustice. And when you focus on fixing, people want to fix the people. But we are going to try and fix the conditions, and that makes the work harder. Fixing the people doesn't work, but it's easier, and it looks easier. It's like putting lipstick on a pig. You can do it, it looks a little fancy, but it doesn't really work. So we're going to go back to these three questions. Who are we? How did we get here? And what are we going to do about it? And what we're going to do about it is equity literacy today. You're going to try and find ways to see more injustice. Go to sessions that will open your eyes and help you see the kinds of injustice you can't already see. If you can see racism, but you don't know what cis-sexism is, we're going to have to find ways to see cis-sexism. Probably not here, though, because today is racism and classism. So if you see racism and classism, then find ways to respond to racism and classism. If you can respond, find ways to redress. That's what we're going to do today.